Well, tourism, as you know, is the largest and fastest growing industry in the world today, with 10% of GDP, global GDP, and 1 in 10 workers employed through tourism. And last year, some $800 billion of foreign direct investment in tourism across the world. We had 1.2 billion people flying across borders for touristic purpose, and they spent just over $1.3 trillion. Now, this is huge. So 79 countries of the world have now become tourism dependent to the extent that they are 10% or more of their GDP. That's a big chunk of the global economy that tourism is responsible for. But there's something about tourism that, although it's resilient, and it's perhaps the most resilient of industries, it's also vulnerable, and is the most vulnerable. It is vulnerable to exogenous and endogenous shocks, global shocks and events relating to cyber crimes, to terrorism, to pandemics, to epidemics, and climatic events, hurricanes and tsunamis and earthquakes and seismic activity, economic crises and downturns, as well as geopolitical disruptions. So what do we do to protect this industry, but more so to protect the countries that are most vulnerable because they are so highly tourism dependent? And a feature of these highly dependent tourism economies, particularly small countries, is high unemployment, high poverty level, and high crime. This is the mixture that will cause even greater disaster. So the need for us to build capacity to recover quickly when disasters hit those countries is paramount. And it is out of that need to create the ability to recover quickly from disasters, but more so to thrive after recovery. Because it's one thing to recover and stay, the next thing is to be able to manage the next disaster that comes. And herein lies the notion of resilience. So we decided in the Caribbean that we would establish this global center, because there's nowhere in the world as a single repository of information and knowledge and best practices and technological expertise, and also technological equipment to mine data, to analyze data, and then to provide information on a timely basis across the world to countries that are vulnerable. So we decided we'll do such a thing, and we put that center together in the University of the West Indies that is located in Jamaica. But we didn't want to do that alone, because the Caribbean is not the only region on earth that is highly vulnerable to these mega shocks. And so we pulled together a number of other countries, and we established a board that now consists of players from every continent on the earth. And yesterday we had the first board meeting at the Chesterfield Hotel here in London. And out of that came a whole confluence of partnerships, because a number of other regional groups, recognizing the vulnerabilities of their own region and the need for resilient building in those, are partnering with the center. And so we have the Mediterranean Tourism Foundation, which is led by Her Excellency, the President of Malta, who also made a presentation to the board. The International Tourism Investment Conference, which is out of Mauritius. And later we will have the new council, Global Resilience Council, which will be established here in London, being part of it. Now that is in addition to the traditional partners who we had of the World Travel and Tourism Council, WTTC, the UNWTO, the major United Nations World Tourism Organization, PATA, which is the Pacific Tourist Authority, and the Caribbean Hotel and Tourist Association, and the Caribbean Tourism Organization. We've also brought together universities, a number of universities for the academic value, because if the center is to be effective, it has to also be highly researched. It has to also have publications that are credible and that are contributed to by very knowledgeable and profound scholars. So 6 universities are partnering with the council so far. The University of the West Indies, the Bournemouth University here in the UK, and their head of their crisis management department, Professor Lee Miles, is the chairman, in fact, of the editorial board for the journal that will be created as a result of this interaction. And then we have Northeastern University in Boston, the US, Hong Kong Polytechnic, and George Washington University, as well as the University of the West Indies. We are having discussions with other universities, such as the International University of Japan and Harvard University in the US. What we're trying to do here is to pull together a number of key institutions with capacity to drive greater knowledge and more research and academic rigor in dealing with finding solutions and finding practices and systems and processes that will enable the countries of the world that are vulnerable to, first of all, be able to detect and track these disruptions. Secondly, to be able to mitigate against these disruptions. Thirdly, to manage them when they hit you. And fourthly, to recover and recover quickly. But most importantly, 50, to build better afterwards. So we're not just talking here about resilience to survive, but resilience to thrive after your survival. And this, I believe, is a game changer because there is no single institution in the world that is a repository of this kind of information and support for countries that are vulnerable. And particularly we are concerned about the small countries that have less resources and less capabilities to respond to these pressures. I had an example to show, for example, of Puerto Rico that had Hurricane Irma that hit. They lost about 60% of their GDP in the process. But the immediate report of death was something like 36 people, right? By 6 months, it became 1,360 because the capacity to recover wasn't there. And even though they were part of the great United States, that capacity still was lacking. So once we are able to build, we reduce deaths and we reduce the impact and the consequential damages after these events hit countries. And finally, we want to build a resilience barometer to be able to measure the level of resilience that countries have. This is going to be very important in terms of huge decision-making activities across the globe. It's going to determine sometimes where the market goes and the feeling of comfort that people have to travel and to travel to those destinations. Because if we can create a resilience index, for example, and we can then measure the levels of resilience in each country as per the index, we'll be able to guide people as to where to travel, where to go, even when to go, recognizing that when these disruptions hit those places, they have the capacity to withstand it and to recover quickly. So it gives them a sense of comfort, it gives them a sense of satisfaction that yes, I can go and enjoy my vacation and I can be comfortable even in the face of hurricanes and earthquakes and other such disruptive activity. Well, what I want to add, in fact, is that the resilience barometer will also be a guide to investors going into areas and will assist in determining the level of investments that they put and the risk. And the risk would have impact on cost of building and cost of money to those destinations. So we think that the resilience index is going to be a great game changer in terms of developing a barometer and a kind of indicative arrangement for not only investment and marketing and travel, but also for a sense of safety and comfort and seamlessness in terms of the tourism marketing. Key to all of our activities of travel is to feel safe, secure, and to have a seamless vacation.